so that we get started. All right, confirm if you can see my screen, please.
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome, awesome. Okay,
Yes,
so
I can see.
awesome. All right. Just like we saw last week, right? I'm just going to do a little bit of a fresher of what we did last week, so that those of us who joined last week and then those who didn't join, is able to have a little idea of what we spoke about last week, right? So last week we are mainly focusing on Microsoft Teams Admin Center, right? How you are able to administer Microsoft Teams to your organizations, to people that you are, that is in your own Microsoft 365 tenant, right? So we are focusing on each of the workloads that you have in Microsoft Teams. We've started talking about Teams and of course all the features that you have on that particular menu icon, right? So of course, before we get to the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, you have to either log into the Office 365 directly by going to office.com, right, and navigating to the admin center and then getting here, or you can go to admin.teams.microsoft.com. Then it brings you to the Teams admin center, right? Okay, right. So last week we talked a whole lot about management of Microsoft Teams, how you can create a teams from the admin center, mainly focusing on creation of Microsoft Teams on the admin center, right? We saw a situation where the two types of teams that you were able to create from the Teams admin center, right? The private team and then the public team as well, right? But then I thought to myself, I said, it is possible, right, that we may not have seen the features that you have when you're creating Microsoft Team group, right, as an admin person from the Teams client, right? Now, what we have seen here is, creating the team directly from the Teams admin center as a Microsoft administrator, right? Now, you have only these two options to create that, but it gives you a different options when you're creating a team from the Teams client as an administrator, right? And we are going to see that, in very soon. Now, there was a question also that was asked, right? And I was going to, show us that in today's class. That was, Emmanuel asking a question last week of how you can restrict people from creating Microsoft Teams in your environment, and it's very important. It's very important, especially for a school environment, right? Right. A school environment is a situation where you have students who has enrolled, and then you are using Microsoft Teams as your channel for communication and collaboration, right? And then allowing people to create teams and to create groups means that students can decide to create, teams and or create Microsoft channels within their own cliques, right? And then you, as an admin person, you would have no visibility, or you find it difficult to manage that situation. So it's always important that you manage who can create a team, and then who is able to create a particular team in your environment. So we would briefly see that before we venture into to this class as well, right? So quickly, on the Teams client, right? So like I already showed us here, if you're creating a team as an admin person, right? These are the two options that you see: private team and of course a public team. So while this is restricted, as the name implies, private, the public is available for anybody within your organization, right? But on the Teams client, as an admin person, if you create a team, it gives you three different visibility to what you can create, right? One of them is create from scratch, create from a group or a team. We are also going to look at this later, right? But the focus here is to create from scratch. Now, when you create from scratch, right, just like the way we saw here, what we saw here, it means also creating a team from scratch, where you have two options here. From the client, you have three options, right? As an admin person, right? Now, bear in mind that these three options are only visible when you're creating Microsoft Teams as an administrator from the Teams client. The Teams client now is when you're logged into the Teams application, either on the web browser or on the desktop application, right? So as an administrator, you're logged into the client, you're creating Microsoft, a team chat channel or a team group. You are going to have these three options. Now, this is going to be different from what a normal user would see. As a normal user, you've given the permission to be able to create a team, right? This is going to be different from theirs, right? So Microsoft has given the permission for only the administrators to be able to create an org-wide team. So this is called an org-wide team. Now, this org-wide team is a type of team that automatically allows everyone within your organization to join a particular team, right? Just like we saw on a public team, when you create a public team, you give it a name, you give it, you assign the members of that, the people you want to be the members of that particular team, you assign the members, you assign ownership and all of that, right? For org team, the members are added by default, and then also the owners are added by automatically as well. Now, the owners of the org team are going to be all administrators of your organization. So if we have about 6 administrators of your organization, those are going to be added automatically to your org team. Then every other members of your organization, that are not administrators, are going to be part of the members of that particular team, right? So what this use is like a dynamic group membership, right? It uses what we call a dynamic group membership, which I will probably show us later while we go into the class, right? So it uses some sort of a dynamic group membership to add users automatically using your tenant membership, right? And then it adds everybody to that team. An example would be what you also have here, right? So you have what we call Contoso here, right? This Contoso is also an all-white team. So the moment you create your organization's tenant and then you create a team, by default, Microsoft also creates an a default all-white team for you, right, for your organization, right, and then it gives it the name of that organization. So now, if the name of my organization is Contoso, it gives it Contoso. If the name of organization is ABC, it gives it ABC as well. So, and all users in that organization will be added to the team. So if you go to manage team and you go to members, right? Now, by default, like we said, everyone who is the administrator of that particular team will become owners of that team. So you can see all the users you have here are administrators of this tenant, and then they would be owners by default, while the rest of the people in your organization will be members. So this is what you're going to see differently if you're creating a team from the admin center, right? And then, of course, by limitations, you can only create 5 org-wide team by default. So if you're looking to create more org-wide team, you can only create just 5 org-wide team by default, as opposed to other type of teams that you can create. Now, when you talk about public team, you are able to create up to 200 teams, right? And you're able to also create 200 private teams as well, right? All right, so that's that. As to what you can see when creating a team as an admin person, right? Okay, and the next thing we want to talk about is how to restrict users, right? To creating a team. Now, I'm logged into this person here as an admin person, right? I'm logged into this user as an admin. So this user here is an admin user, and I have other users here also logged into um another browser as well. So I'm going to navigate to Teams client with this user logged in here, and let's see how it reflects on the user to sign in as a Teams client, right? So here I have a user called Lynn Robbins here. So again, Lynn Robbins here can create a team. So if I go to create a team, go to create from scratch, you can see this is a normal user, and the user just has 2 options to create a team from scratch, right? You don't see the org team because this user is not a global administrator or any sort of administrator in that particular tenant. So now basically I just wanted to show us that this user is able to create a team, and then be sure to note the name of this user. This is Lynn Robbins, right? So what we want to do now is to restrict users who are able to create a team. now in our organization. And then to do that, we would need to run a PowerShell command, right? Now, this PowerShell command we need to run is visible to to a public article. Now, this is a Microsoft public article with the name manage who can create a team in Office 365, right? So with this particular article, there is already a PowerShell existing here that you can run, right, to enable that particular feature, right? There are just few things that you may need to do and create before you can, enable that feature. So I'm going to copy this PowerShell and then open my PowerShell command here, right? Quickly open a new tab here, right? If you're going to run this on a PowerShell, be sure that you're opening your PowerShell as an administrator, right? I like to use the PowerShell ISE. It gives me that notepad, feature. I'm able to see what I'm typing. I'm able to also, have insight to, what I'm running as well. Okay, so bear in mind that to run this, well, you need to ensure that you have an Azure um, module, an Azure PowerShell module installed on your computer, right? And to do that, all I need to do is, install Azure AD module and then import the module as well, right? So quickly going to run this, right? Just to install that module. Right, so I have that installed already. So after the installation, you need to import the module as well, just to have it available on the computer, right? The next thing is to connect here. But if you look at the PowerShell I've already copied here, it also has another connect Azure AD here. I'm going to just remove this because I already have it on that other PowerShell. I'm going to remove this just to show that I have only the PowerShell to enable the feature of to disable the feature of group creation here, right? Now I have the PowerShell. So then another thing I need to do is to create a group. Now I need to create a group I need to create a group to lock that particular feature, right? Because according to what we already spoke about in Microsoft Teams has to do all about policy assignment, right? Whatever feature you need to enable or disable in Microsoft Teams, you have to either enable it through a policy or through basically policy assignment, right? So to achieve this, we would need to create a group. We'll need to create a group, and it's going to be a security group, right? Now, so I can create this group from my admin center here. So coming over to my admin center, I go to security group. I create a security group. Now, in doing this, I always want to make it visible so that even if I leave an organization, anyone who becomes a new administrator is able to understand it's able to understand the features or the naming convention that I've used to create those particular groups. So I'm going to call this allowed group creators. Right, I'm going to call this the allowed group creators. I might decide to also give a description, right, just so that it creates visibility for anyone who wants to go through that particular want to see what that particular group is doing. Right now, I'm not going to do any role assignment on this group. I'm going to go to next and then finish creating the group. Right, then once the group is done creating, I'm going to come back and add users that I want them to be able to create create group using that particular security group. So I'm going to refresh here so that is created. So you can see the group here, allowed group creators, right? So go over to members, manage members. So here I'm going to add the list of the people I want them to be able to create a group in this particular feature. So I'm going to allow that to load. Let's give it a moment. You can refresh that page as well. You give it a refresh just so that it loads the members of that particular group. So going over again to the security group. Or we could do a search, right? So I'm going to allow some few members. Let's say I know one of the members to be Alan. So I'm going to search for Alan. So add Alan here. right? I'm going to also add my name as part of people I want them to be able to create a group, right? So we have only allowed two people, to be able to create a group using that security group, right? Now we've added those people to that particular group. So the next thing we want to do is to copy the name of this group. Copy the name of this group that you've created, and then go back to your PowerShell. Then replace this particular line of the code with the name of the group that you've created, right? And ensure that you remove the brackets. The only thing you need to leave there is just the invited comma, open and close, right? Now we've added that group there. So the next thing we want to do is to connect to Azure AD, right, with your administrative uh, credentials. So if I run this command to connect, request for my sign in. All right, so once your sign-in credentials are confirmed, you will see yourself logged in on your account and then the tenant as well. So now we can go over to here and then highlight all of this command, and run selection. Okay, I think we are having some error. Let's see what that is. Okay, just to be sure that we have all the curly brackets open and closed. Okay, so all the curly brackets are met. So let's run this again and see why that is not going through. Still throwing the error. Let me see this. So it's saying here that this particular directory is not a recognized directory, right? So this might be because we've not installed the right Azure module, right? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to install another Azure module. Let's see if that helps. So I'm going to install module. The name of the module I'm going to install this time is Azure AD Preview. So one of the reasons why when you're running a PowerShell, right, you need to understand, some of the PowerShell that you're running. So now in Azure AD module, right, some of the module that we might be running, or this particular PowerShell is carrying, may not be available on this particular module, right? So now I want to install the Azure AD Preview and then see if that particular module is in that package, in this particular package, right? So I'm going to install this. And then it prompts you, and then click yes to all. So now it's installing all the packages for this Azure AD Preview. Hopefully we are able to get the module in this particular package that we are installing. Okay, so while that is installing in the background, we would come back to execute that, right? But of course, you understand the concept of what I'm trying to explain, right? In terms of what we're trying to achieve here, we'll still visit that back just so we see how that works, and then still how we implement that when it comes to when it comes to restricting users from creating a group within Office 365, right? Now, bear in mind that when you restrict that group creation, it affects the users on creating group in all Microsoft 365 workload, right? It's not just going to restrict them from creating Microsoft Teams group, right? It's going to restrict them from creating groups in all workloads. When it comes to Exchange, it's going to restrict them from creating a group, right? So it's going to restrict them from creating a group in all workloads. So you should bear in mind, you should put that into consideration of how you want to restrict that part. Of course, you can also restrict it, right? But then ensure that you have some members of your organization at a strategic place who can create those group. And then subsequently, with the security group that we have created, and if you have any user who has joined the organization and you intend to give the person that permission, all you need to do is go to that security group and then add the person to the security group, and then the person begins to have that permission to be able to create a group, right? So that's the essence of how you can manage, you can create a group, and then we are going to visit that just once, so we don't waste too much time on that, right? We're just going to visit that towards the end of the class, and then go over that as well, right? So we have seen also the team settings, the team's policy. We explained the team's policy last time, right? The next thing we are going to face into look at is teams template. Now the teams template here is basically the options that you are going to get when you're creating a Microsoft Teams, right? Now remember that when we try to create a team from the admin center here, it didn't give us any options, right? It didn't give us any details as to what we are to get when we are creating that particular team. The only thing you're going to have here is just a private and a public team, right? And then the owner of the team, you can add multiple owners. By default, it's going to assign the person who is going to create that's the admin person sign into the account here as the owner, right? But when you're creating Microsoft Teams from the Teams client, it gives you too many options. It gives you options that allows you to choose what you need to create, right? One of those options is to select in a template, right? So if you go over here to create a team, you can see select template. Now these templates are based on the policy that you've assigned to this user who is creating this team, right? I can see manage a project, manage events, adopt Office 365. Now each of these template has been created by Microsoft as to what they feel should be available in those Microsoft Teams channel, right? Now, when you talk about adopt Microsoft 365, you create a team with that particular template, you'll be seeing things like, a pilot user, make a test calls and the rest of it, right? You create a team with an incident response. You understand what an incident response means, right? You want to create a team that responds to an incident within your organization. So these are all templates that have been created by Microsoft. You can see a hotel, bank branch, manage volunteers, frontline collaboration. So these are the templates that has been created and are visible to users when you are creating a team based on the policy that has been assigned to those users. So if you look at these policies, these are available by what has been created by default by Microsoft, right? But under here is where we have the template policy. Now you can see that under the template policy, we only have the org-wide template policy here, the org-wide template policy here, and then this is what is assigned to everybody within your organization, right? Now, as an admin person, you are able to remove all the template policy, which means that you don't want users to be able to see any default Microsoft template when creating a Microsoft team. So I can decide to select and hide all of this. Can decide to select all of this. You can see by default, you have 15 templates. I can hide all of these templates, right? By hiding all of these templates, it means that this template will no longer be available to use, right? Now, this template has been hidden and then will not be seen, by anybody who is creating a team. And then one thing that is important for us to note in Microsoft Teams is sometimes that when you assign a policy to a user, we would always tell you to at least allow 1 hour to 2 hours, at most 24 hours for those template, that policy to reflect, right? So you can see that I just made I just applied a feature on this policy, which means what I've done here is that I've hidden all of this template, which means that it should not be available for users when they are creating a team, right? But let's see if that has reflected on this user. So if you create a team here, you can see that the template still reflects, right? So which means it might take a little while before that policy reflects on the user, right? Now this is a different that what we've done here. Another thing we can also do, apart from the OGWI policy, is to create a policy, right? You create a policy. Say for example, you want to create a policy for a marketing team, right? So I'm going to call it marketing template. Call it marketing template. And now these are all the templates that are going to be visible for the marketers, right? When creating a team. And then we don't want all this to be available for them. We're going to hide it as well and click on save. Now, as an administrator, you want to create your own template, right, to suit the particular department or unit you want that particular template to reflect on. So what we can do also is come back here on the Teams template and click on add. Right now, when you click on add template, you have different options, right? So you can create a new template, right, which means that you want to select features that you want to be available on that template, by your own choice, right? You want to set the features, the applications that you want to be in that particular template that you're creating. You can also use an existing template, which means that the default template that Microsoft already has existing, right? You can use that, you can leverage on that to create your own templates, right? And then build on that particular one. You can also start using an existing template, which means that you can start using an existing template that has been customized already by Microsoft, right? In that case, you're not editing that particular template. You're using it as it has been created. But for this one, this option allows you to edit that template and then create it to match your own feature or to match your own taste within your organization. So creating a new template, you give it a name, like we already mentioned. We're creating one for marketing, so we're going to call it marketing templates. Right, so you can give it a description here, or you can just copy and paste the same thing. I'm going to just copy and paste the same thing here, right? So leave it at English United States, and then you by default, of course, you already know there's going to be a general channel, right? If you also want to add additional channel, you can also add that as well, right? I can see here, call this one sales, right? Shown by default. If I want to add additional template as well or application, I can do that, right? But I'm just going to add sales, right? If I can, it also gives you option to add applications. If there's any application that marketing uses and then it's available by default in Microsoft Teams or that you have built in your own organization, right? Of course, we know that Microsoft Teams allows us to come up with our own custom developed applications, right? We are also going to see that in the course of the training as well, right? How to upload any application that you may have developed, right? So if you already have that existing in your own tenant, you're able to search maybe that particular app is dedicated or particular to marketing, right? So you can search for the name of the app and then put it there, right? So, but for example, I'm going to use an example here. Let's see shift, right? Let's see shift, not coming up. Let's look for planner, right? And see if planner is going to be available. So we have tax by planner here. So I'm going to use planner, for example, apply that, and that will be all, right? So you created your own template. So this is a template that you've created, and under the policy here, which is marketing policy, we are now going to see that template here. You can see the template is already existing here as one of the visible or viewable templates for marketing, right? So here you don't need to save again, because that is already as part of a viewable template, right, which you've created. So you can cancel this and then assign this template to any marketing team member, right? So you can assign this policy to any marketing team member by clicking on manage users and then assign that policy to that particular user. And when you assign that, the policy is going to reflect on the user, and then the user, when creating a team, would only be able to see that marketing template when creating a team. So he or she do not need to start creating a team from scratch, and then trying to assign applications and all of that. You have already streamlined with a template how a marketing team should look like, right? So that's what templates helps you to do in Microsoft Teams. Okay, right. Moving on, we go to Teams update policies. Now, Teams update policies by default is some sort of policies or some sort of new features, right? As an administrator, you want to manage the new features that the Microsoft releases, right? Now, Microsoft sends or releases applications or features within the Microsoft 365 every 2 weeks, right? So to say, right? So I have an article here which shows us an example of that. So if you look at this article, please confirm you can see my screen, please.
Yes,
Yes, we
yes.
can.
Yes, we can see your
Yes, I
screen.
can see it.
Awesome. Awesome. So here, so you have Microsoft Release Notes, right? So Microsoft Release Note for Microsoft Teams. Now you can see the latest release that we have is August 24th, 2023, and then the last one was before that was August 10th, 2023 as well. So you can see this gap is just a 2 weeks gap, right? If you also look further, you can see the July 27th, right? So this is like a 2 weeks gap, right? So Microsoft releases its update and features within 2 weeks. Microsoft Teams now, right, releases its it might be for Microsoft clients, it might be for Microsoft devices, it might be for Microsoft different other Microsoft users, like people who are using a virtual desktop environment, people are using different platforms of Microsoft Teams, right? But as far as Microsoft Teams is concerned, there is always an update, right, that comes in, or new features that comes in every 2 weeks, right? Now, when those new features comes in, right, there is that's what is called rings, or rings of availability within Microsoft, right? Now, Microsoft in their own nature has what is called ring 1, ring 2, and ring 3. Now, ring 3 is where general availability belongs to, which means that people who are your organization now, or every Microsoft 365 tenant belongs to ring 3, which is the general availability, right? But then, as an administrator, you want to be able to see these features on time to determine uh, its usage. Maybe you want to be able to teach users its adoption. You want to be able to show users how to use that particular feature before someone calls you and say, I can see this particular feature on my Microsoft Teams. I don't know what it's meant for, right? So, an administrator, you want to be proactive to say you want to see those features and then be able to teach your users how to administer those features as well. So you can see here by default it shows Microsoft controlled. Microsoft controlled means that before it gets to your tenant, right? Because before it gets to your own tenant, that is where it has been tested, right? Microsoft has tested it and made sure that there is no bugs. Everything that needs to be done has been done before it goes to the general availability, and that is why it is Microsoft controlled, right? But then you can create it in such a way that it reflects on your own organization by creating new policy, right? Now you don't want that particular feature to be available for every user when it is first released, even before testing, right? So you want to create a new policy where you can turn a classic Teams default user. Now this means that when the feature is being released, right, is being released for a user who you've opted in for that particular feature to be released for. So the person is able to understand what the feature looks like. Is able to also understand be able to teach users on how to use a particular feature before it comes to general availability, right? So basically that's what you use your team update policy to do, and by default, again, it is put under Microsoft controlled, right? Which means that Microsoft would have tested the feature in the first ring and the second ring before it gets to the third ring, which is the general availability. Okay. All right, so moving on again, we have the Teams upgrade settings. All right, the Teams upgrade settings. Before now, is where a lot of magic happens, right, when it comes to Microsoft Teams. And that was when we had Microsoft Skype for Business, right? And during the existence of Microsoft Skype for Business, it was really a huge thing for Microsoft Teams administrators on how to handle the coexistent mode of Microsoft Teams, right? Now, by now, because Microsoft Skype for Business has been deprecated, right? Every organization are now using Microsoft Teams. Aside for those who are still using Microsoft Skype for Business on premises, that's those who has the Skype for Business server, and then they are still using the Skype for Business internally, right? But as far as Microsoft Online is concerned, every user has now been moved to what is called Microsoft Teams only, being their coexistent mode, right? So in most organizations, this is what you're going to be seeing there. So you won't be able to make any changes here as far as Microsoft is concerned currently, right? So now, again, at the time when this happened, at the time when people were using Skype for Business, you were able to determine where you want your user to also join your meetings, and then be able to take their calls. So it was a headache at the time, right? Especially for people who were in what is called island mode, right? You see, people are in island mode. They receive calls in Skype for Business. Their meetings, it goes to Microsoft Teams. So it was really a headache at the time, right? But thank God for the deprecation of Skype for Business. Your collaboration, your meetings, your calls, your chats now happens just in Microsoft Teams, right? So that's about Teams upgrade and settings, right? Don't know if anyone has any question before we move to the next feature, right? I'd like to take a question, as to what we have discussed so far. If there's no question, maybe we could go through and then finalize on the how to control, who can manage, or who can create group before we can go to other features that we have. Any questions so far? Okay, or we can leave question, for the Q&A session, which is fine with me, right? All right, so let's go over to the PowerShell. Let's see if we are now able to uh, run the PowerShell. Let's see. Okay. Right, so I'm going to also import module here. For some reason, still getting some sort of errors in even installing this. Let's see. So I'm going to run it for the last time, right? And if this doesn't get started, hopefully maybe I could look at it again and then see how I can resolve this on my own, right? So we don't just delay the class in all of this, right? Okay, so I think you may have succeeded, right? Right, so let's try to import now. That has imported. Let's see if this goes through now. Still throwing an error. Not sure why. Let's see what that error is. Okay, so I'll probably review this PowerShell. It's been a while I ran this PowerShell, so I'm not sure why it's throwing this error. So I'm just going to review it and then check reason why that error is coming up, right? And hopefully we can get that resolved in our next class. Hopefully, yeah. Okay, so
All right,
I'm
no
just going
problem.
to, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to just do a brief introduction on the managed users, right? And the user that you have in Microsoft Teams. I know I'm just going to be rounding up the class right now, right? But just a quick introduction as to what you have on managed users, right? Now, under the managed users, you have different type of users, right? You have the guest users, you have the external users, which we are going to be talking about, right? But under the managed users here is where you have all the users that have been assigned with license within Microsoft Teams in your own organization, right? So here is where you have users visibility, right, as to the username, the phone number assigned to them, the usage location, the state where possible, and all of that, right? But clicking on each user gives you more insight as to the user details when it comes to the usage of Microsoft Teams, right? So here you have what is called account, Teams, voice, voicemail, meetings and calls, Teams devices, policies, and then of course Microsoft Teams usage, right? Right. So in our next class, we are going to be digesting each of this feature. We are going to be digesting each of those feature that you have in Microsoft Teams user, right? We're able to see, what enables who for what, and then how you are also able to manage a user account from the admin perspective, as to what the user sees on the Teams client, right? So how you're able to manage this from this user perspective from the admin center, and then what it's also left for the user to manage from their own Teams client, right? Okay, so I think that will bring us to the end of the class for today, right? In order not to bore so much with so many Microsoft Teams jargons, right? So if there's any question whatsoever, I would take the questions now. Or of course, if you wanna, if you guys want me to also go ahead with the explanation, I don't mind. We could spare another 15 minutes or 10 minutes just to explain this particular feature when it comes to Teams user. What do we say?
I think we can take 30 more minutes, GD. You can go
Okay,
ahead.
awesome, awesome. Okay, all right. So here, we have like I already said, we have managed users, and then under the managed users, like I already mentioned, you see users who has been assigned with Microsoft Teams license, right? Who already have Microsoft Teams license and has been enabled with a particular service, right? They are going to come up here, right, with the users, and then you can see here also there's a disclaimer here, right? Users without active Microsoft Teams license are excluded from the user list after 30 days, right? So which means that if you have assigned or unassigned a license from a user and then they are still appearing here, right? So this is a disclaimer for you that after 30 days, you can check back to ensure that they are no longer part of that particular this Microsoft Teams managed users, right? And then you know there's something that people also forget to bear in mind, right? Now when you unassign a license that activates a user from Microsoft Teams, right? Remove that license, and then the user no longer appears in your Microsoft Admin Center, right? Now that user is still available in your Microsoft Azure AD Active Directory, right? Which means that the user is still searchable within your Microsoft team. So now the reason why I want to mention this is because there are some situations where I've people who has come to say I have unassigned a license from a user, but when I go to Microsoft Teams client, I search for that particular user, and the user still appears as a user. Now, this is because when you do a search for a user on your client, right? Now, Microsoft Teams services does what is called a people search, right? When it does that people search, it fetches the attribute of that user from not just your Teams client, right, or your Teams admin center. It also fetches the attribute of that user from your Azure Active Directory, right? You also see some administrators say, okay, you know what, I've gone to the Exchange global address list, I have blocked this user from the GAL, and yet they are still searchable. Yes, they'll be searchable because Microsoft Teams does not only rely on your Exchange GAL to fetch the people search services, right? It's also dependent on the Azure Active Directory. And as far as those users are still available on your Azure Active Directory, they will continue to be searchable within the Microsoft Teams client. So bear that in mind, in terms of assigning a license and or unassigning a license from a user, right? Okay, so taking a deep dive to a user here on Microsoft Admin Center, we'll see the different features that you have available for the user here. Now, the first thing we see here is account, right? Now, the account here shows us the Teams upgrade settings like we already saw earlier, right? So like I mentioned to us, by default, every user are now set to Teams only coexistent mode, right? As opposed to what we had about 2 years ago or a year ago, where we had Skype for Business still available for users, and you can switch the coexistent mode here, right, for a user, right? The one we saw earlier was where you could switch it for the entire organization. It was if it was available, but you can also switch it for individual users from here if it was still available as well. Now, the other one you see here is the general information of the user. If your user has a number assigned as to Microsoft Teams calling plan, right, which we are also going to discuss later in the class, as to the number assigned to the user for making calls, the number type, and of course the emergency address assigned to the user as well. So you're going to see all of those here if that has been assigned to the user. Now the other one here is audio conferencing. Now audio conferencing refers to a dialing number or a dialing meeting, right? That is assigned to a user, right? For example, when a user creates a meeting here, right? If I create a meeting here, go to my calendar and then create a meeting. I'm going to create a quick test meeting, for example. Okay, so double click on the meeting. Now you will see the details of the meeting information. Now, under the details of the meeting information, you would see what is called audio only. So this audio only that you see here, right, is the audio conferencing that we are referring to. Now, this audio conferencing is available for users who has the required license that would enable them for this feature, right? How is that possible? So if you go over to here, right, you can see the user I have used to sign in and create this meeting is called MOD administrator, right? So if you go to users, under active users, let's look at the license that the MOD user has, right? And then what powers the user for that feature. So if you go to MOD here, click on MOD, then go to licenses and apps. Now this particular user has Microsoft 365 E5 license, right? Now if you dive into apps. That's the list of services that is powered by that feature, right? So you go down, you will see what is called audio conferencing, right? Now, this audio conferencing service is what has enabled that user to be able to create type of meeting that has this dialing audio, right? So basically, audio conferencing allows users to dial into your meeting without clicking on the joining meetings. Most of us who join this call we are on now would have clicked the join URL to join this meeting, right? But say for example we have someone who does not have who is not on his laptop and then intends to listen into this particular call, right? This particular meeting that we're having, person can simply dial in to this particular number, right? The moment you dial into this number, it requests you to enter this particular conference ID, right? This conference ID is also the same thing with this one as well. So it requires that you enter the conference ID of that particular meeting, right? So once you dial the conference ID followed by hash key, it dials you in to this particular meeting. Bearing in mind that every meeting that you create will have its own separate or specific conference ID, right? So if this user creates another meeting, the conference number is going to be the same thing, right? But the conference ID is going to change, right? So for every meeting that you create, the audio conferencing ID is going to be different for every other one that you create, as within your organization, right? Now you can also see here that this number is particular for this particular user. So this is the number that is going to be visible for every user within your organization that's going to create a meeting that has been enabled for audio conferencing, right? And like we already saw, there's a license that powers that particular feature. So if a user has the Microsoft 365 E5, right, you have audio conferencing enabled with that particular feature, right? But wait, let's say we have a user who has a different license. Let me see if I have another license that is not E5. Let me see that. Okay, so we only have E5 here, right? So we may not be able to do that test, right? But just so we know, uh, it's only E5 license that enables you for audio conferencing. So if you have any other license that is not E5, right? If you need to, if you would need to power your users for audio conferencing, you might need to buy an audio conferencing license separately from the base license that you have. So say for example, you have an E3 license, right? And then you want to power your users for audio conferencing, you would need to buy audio conferencing separately, right? If you have the business license, you will need to also buy that separately as well, right? Just so you power your users for audio conferencing, right? So that's what audio conferencing does for you, right? So under Teams as well, we have, like we already saw, where we can create a team. You can see by default, this user belongs to the Contoso team, which is the global org-wide team that everybody belongs to, right? So you can create an additional team to add the user there. If the user belongs to more than one team, you will see all of those teams listed here as well under the team side of things, right? Now, under voice is where you can create settings for this particular user, right? Now you can create call answering rules, you can create outbound calling rules, you can create delegation for this particular user, right? So as an admin person, depending on what that particularly your user is asking for, you are able to create those here, right? Now the user is able to create the same feature for him or herself on the Teams client, right? But then a user will make a request to say, you know what, I want to change I want to change the way my call answering are being dialed in. I want to delegate my calls to my assistant and the rest of it, right? So you can determine how the calls are being ranked, right? So you can forward your calls to a voicemail when your call comes in a terms where you are in say for example you are on leave, right? And then you want your calls to be forwarded, right? An admin person can also do that as well. Or say for example, we have a user who has gone on a leave in an organization and then he or she did not forward their calls to a voicemail, and then they are not taking that calls either as well while they are on leave. So as an admin person, because you do not have access to their client, you can also forward your calls to another number, right? Or you can forward your calls to a person or forward it to a voicemail, right? Just to make the other party calling understand that the user is not available to take their calls at the time when the call is being rang, right? Okay, so you can do two things here, right? So you can ring the user and at the same time ring other users simultaneously, right? You can ring another user simultaneously, which means that I have Alex who is the user here, and then has he has a PA, right? I want the PA's teams to ring at the same time when I am also calling Alex as well. So I can configure that here, and then say Alex PA here is Alan, right? So I'm going to configure Alan here. So the moment a call rings Alex, Alan at the same time is being rang, right? And then I can also configure, if it is not answered, what do I need to do? Do I want to forward to a voicemail? Do I want to forward to a person? Do I want to forward it to a number, right? Do I want to forward it to a group pickup, right? Group pickup now means that you need to now configure more than one person, right? You have a group of persons, you configure them to be ranked after the user fails to pick that call. You also may want to do a call delegation, right? A call delegation in the sense that, of course, in call delegation, you may want to assign that directly to a user, right? In picking those calls. In that case, you delegate Alex's call to a user, and then you add the user that you want to delegate that call to, which means that here in this case, Alex will be ranked, right? But the call will be delegated to another user as well. But in call delegations, I always advise people, because you are delegating your calls, which means that in quote, you don't want to be disturbed at a time when the calls are ringing, right? So you may want to be immediately be forwarded. So when your call comes in, it doesn't go to your device directly, it is forwarded to the delegate that you have specified, right? But if it is user's request to be ranked and at the same time ring the delegate, then you're also able to configure that, right? So it just based on the user request. If they're forwarding the call to a user, they're forwarding the call to a call group, or they want to forward the call to a delegate, it all depends on their request, and you can configure all of those in your you can configure all of those in the Teams admin center here, right? Just as the way the user can also configure the same feature on the Teams client here, right? As you have it here, right? So if you go to settings here as well, go to calls, the user is able to also forward their calls here and configure their incoming calls as they want it here as well, right? So command forward my call or do nothing if on or answered, or forward my call. So these are the things that the user can also do from the Teams client. But of course, in our training, we are focusing mainly on the Teams admin center, and then what the administrator can do in terms of user management, right? So another thing again here is the voicemails, right? So you can also configure user voicemails in Microsoft Teams admin center for a particular user. Remember, again, for you to do this, you will need to be inside the user account, right? Remember, this can only be done on the user account. As of today, there is no general push. What I mean by general push now is the general place of managing multiple user accounts, right? Assigning these multiple features to a particular user. I can only do this per user. So if you need to enable this, you would need to be, sign into the admin center, take a deep dive to the user account, and then you're able to configure any of this particular feature, right? Okay, so on the voicemail, the user voicemail, of course, by default is turned on, all right? And then bear in mind also that the voicemail of a user is powered by a license as well, right? For a user to be able to receive a voicemail in Teams, you will need to be assigned with an exchange license, right? So if, for example, you do not have, or your users are not assigned with an exchange license, it will be difficult or they would not receive a voicemail, right? Let me not say it will be difficult. They would not receive a voicemail. So if, for example, you have users who has a different emailing system that is not Microsoft Exchange, right? You have people who are using Google Workspace or any other emailing system, and then you've enabled them for Teams, right? Just bear in mind they are not going to be able to receive voicemails because Exchange is what powers your voicemail in Teams. Okay. All right. So moving on as well, we have meetings and calls. Meetings and calls here shows you, your recent meetings, right? Your recent meetings that you have in Microsoft Teams. Microsoft has also made it possible currently that if you are in a call, right, I can be able to see your call lined up here, right? Let's see if we can you can okay, it might cause a disruption, so I would have just shown us that, right? But just bear in mind that if you have a user within your organization that is on a call, right, and they are complaining about how poor their calls are, if the call is ongoing, you are able to see that particular call in this particular session where it's called recent meetings, right? So you will see that ongoing call here, and then you are able to click on that call ID. So let me quickly check to see if there's any user here that I have that has done a test call. Give me a moment. Okay, so I have here. So this is a user. These are past calls or past meetings, as you may refer to it. So you can see these are past meetings, right? And then if you have any ongoing meeting, it's going to reflect here. And like I said, once the meeting is ongoing, it's going to generate what is called a meeting ID or a call ID. And this is what you have here, right? So if a user is on the call and then complains that he or she is having a poor call, what you can do is to click on that meeting ID. On that meeting ID, you are able to have a deep dive into what is going on that call, right? You can have a deep dive onto what is going on that call. You can see here on this particular past call, you can see it is showing me the audio quality is good, is it's completed, right? Because this is a past call, right? But if it's an ongoing call, you are able to see what is happening, right? If you click on the network part of point of side of things, right, you are able to see the average round trip of that particular call. You're able to see the jitter, you're able to see the packet loss and all of that, right? Now, if your packet loss rate is greater than 30%, right, definitely you're going to have a poor call quality, right? Now, again, bear in mind that your call quality in Microsoft Teams is not only related to the network, it can also be the device that the user is making use of, right? It can be ranging from the network of the user, either the user who is calling, the source or the destination. In this case, it can also be the device they are making use of. So Microsoft Teams calculates each of this round trip time, right, when you're on a call, right, in Microsoft Teams call or a Teams meeting. So with all of this, you're able to calculate and understand why a user is having a poor call quality in Microsoft Teams, right? And then you're able to figure out things as well. And then when it comes to calls, Microsoft has already given an insight as to what you can define on your network level, right? For those who are making use of firewalls, for those who are making use of VPNs, right? For those who are making use of proxy servers, right? It has been defined that okay, just quickly let me show us this as well. So now here you have a list of endpoints. You have a list of IP addresses, right? For Microsoft Teams, Exchange, SharePoint, and the likes, right? Now Microsoft has said if you are going to be making use of anything that is going to disturb your network within your your audio calls and the rest of it, ensure that you have all of those bypassed. If you have your VPN, ensure that you have a split tunnel in your VPN. If you have a proxy server, if you have a firewall, ensure that you all of these IPs endpoints are bypassed in your networking environment, right? The reason is because in as much as Microsoft Teams audio call quality, your media qualities are encrypted, right? Introducing any of these devices in terms of VPN, in terms of proxy server, in terms of firewall, are going to create a second layer of encryption, right, on your audio qualities. So by the time you initiate a call, there's already an encrypted media, right, on that particular call. So by the time it gets to the destination, right, there's going to be some sort of a two-way decryption on those calls. And by the time Microsoft has done its decryption because of its own encrypted media, right? Now the number of times it takes to decrypt Microsoft's own encryption and then tries to decrypt your own encryption as well, coming from the firewall or coming from the proxy server. And then bearing in mind that the endpoint that you're sending that packet to may not even understand the payload that is coming from that packet. So it takes time for you to decrypt it, and by the time it takes that time, thereby you're creating a packet loss. And then when the packet loss is created, and then there's a longer round trip return time, you begin to see a poor quality in those particular calls. So this is how you're able to get a deep dive as to issues people are going to be having in their calls and the rest of it for an ongoing call or even a past call as well, right? The next thing here is the Teams devices, right? If users have been added, if your user has been added to Teams devices as well, you're going to see it here. Of course, in most cases, this session is just left for Teams room devices, right? Which is mainly not a user per se, right? So this is left for Teams room devices, which we are also going to discuss in the course of our training when we get to that feature, right? So here you have policies, right? By default, all users are added to are given the global org policy, right? And then you can create your own custom policy and assign to the users. Policy ranges from calling policy, app permission policy, app setup policy, audio conferencing policy. A whole lot of the policy. Like I already said before, Microsoft Teams is all about policy, right? Managing Microsoft Teams is all about policy assignment. So you want to restrict users is a policy. You want to determine what the user sees is a policy. So it's all about policy assignment. And by default, every user is assigned the global org policy, and then you can create the policy by yourself, restrict it using a group policy, specifically targeting numbers of people or a particular user. So that's what you see here, the policies that have been assigned to user, and then what policy the user is also carrying as well. Here we also have usage, right? Usage in this case, right? You want to run a report as to the different type of usage the user has, right? A report for 7 days, a report for 30 days, a report for a custom report as well. But in report running, in the course of the training, I will also show us where we can do a larger part of the reporting, right? But here you can have just a deep dive for a particular user, pull the reports for call duration, for dial out calls, for costing, the user have utilized in terms of user who are using a calling plan, right? So you're able to get those results here by running those reports, right? Okay, so I think that's all about that you will get for a user when you take a deep dive to user management in Microsoft Teams Admin Center. Thank you, and then we can now take questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chidi. It has been a very, very informative session. Personally, I've actually, been able to pen down a lot of new things I don't know before, so we're really grateful. We appreciate your time. So right now, if we have questions, we can just ask our question, and then Chidi will do justice to it. If you have questions, we've actually, talked a lot. We've learned a lot, ranging from managing teams from the admin center. That's the team feature, Microsoft Teams. We've talked about Teams update policies. We even dive into managing users, from the Microsoft Teams admin center. So, if there's any question, we can ask right now. Does anyone have any question? And by the way, I have a question. Maybe I should just start with my. Oh, okay. I think I see Kingsley. Kingsley, can you ask your question? Please unmute and ask your question. Hello, Kingsley. You can unmute and ask your question.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Chidi, for the class. It's very informative. Okay, I just wanted you to please throw more light on how to troubleshoot with respect to packet loss and connectivity issues. For example, when there's a Teams meeting, at some point in time, you discover that some parties cannot hear each other and all that. So I see you run through one or two things around that. Yeah, maybe you can throw more light on it from the admin
Okay.
end.
Okay, so in troubleshooting Teams issues, right? Especially when it has to do with calls, right? There are so many things involved, like I already mentioned, right? One of the things is looking into the admin center, right? That's one. Um, it might be an ongoing call. It might be a call that has been completed, right? Now, if a call has been completed, you can see my screen, right? Instantly.
Yes, I can see your screen. Yes.
All right, awesome. So if the call is completed, you're going to see what is called a caller ID here, a call ID here. So if you click on this call ID, right, this call ID is going to
Yes,
give you
yes.
insight to what happened in that particular call. Now, in this call ID, you're going to see the number of persons, right? Because this is just a one-on-one call, so you might not really have much information. But if this was a meeting where you have multiple people who has joined this meeting, you're going to see the people that joined that particular meeting, right? You're going to see all of them in that call, right? Now you begin to look at each person and then the core quality that they received in that particular meeting. So the Microsoft Teams is going to capture the quality of the call that each user that has joined that meeting received, right? And there you are able to have a deep dive. Now, deep diving in the sense that you may not really determine what the issue was, right? But you're able to have a picture of what happened, right? Now you can click on that user that has complained that he or she had a poor call quality. You can click on the user, just like we have here on this particular user. Now, if the user had a poor call quality, you're going to see it here. In some cases, Microsoft Teams will give you an error code to say poor call due to bad network, right? And it will give you an error code. It will also give you maybe a poor call quality due to device, right? It will also list it here. That is in some scenarios, right? But in the case where it does not give us an insight to that, right? You can even have a deep dive to click on the network here of that particular user. Now, if you click on the deep dive, if you click on the network part of the user, now here gives you even more insight as to the trip return time between the user client to the Microsoft Teams services, right? Because the time you make a call, the call is not just happening within your own environment, right? It leaves your network and then it tries to reach Microsoft services, right? Now, the time it takes that particular call to leave your own Teams client, now it goes through your network parameters, right? Depending on what you've configured in your network parameters. If there are devices that are not sensitive, right? Drivers that are not intelligent to convert some of these medias, they are going to introduce hops, they are going to introduce packet losses, thereby impacting on the user call, right? So this is going to give you insight as to what may have happened. But again, looking at this and then this becomes perfect. You feel okay, you look at this based on Microsoft requirement, all of this has been met and they are all perfect, and then the user has complained, right? You can go further again, apart from what you've seen here, right? There's also debug log here. You can also extract this debug log, and it doesn't just end here. You may even extract this debug log, and this debug log also becomes perfect, and then you see no issues on the debug log, right? We also say, okay, go to the user and export their Teams client, Teams what is called Teams debug log now, right? So for Teams debug log, you just click on Control Alt Shift 1. If you click on Control Alt Shift 1, it's going to download some set of logs for you, right? Once that set of logs is downloaded, you are able to also use that set of logs to even have a deep dive with the caller ID of that particular call, right? Remember, for every session of call that you make, a caller ID is created. So I can say with the caller ID that I have, I can have a deep dive to that caller ID. If I search on that Teams debug log with that caller ID, I can see the the trips that the call had on that particular call, and then I'm able to look at the behavior of the call. I'm able to see what happened. If the user had a call drop, I'm able to also see that, right? I'm able to see what may have caused the call drop to happen. in some cases, Microsoft will give you some sort of a response code, right, as to what happened in that particular call, right? Now, this is what you can do on your own end, right? But if again there's some cases that may be beyond you that you might need to raise a support request with Microsoft to handle. But these are the little things that you can check at your own end as an administrator to have, a little guide, right? And say, okay, even if you're raising a case to Microsoft, you have done this, you have done that, you have confirmed this, you have confirmed that, just so that they know what you have done and what you have not done. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Very
All right.
informative. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other question from the house? Okay. Chidi, I was just wondering, is there any workaround, if you don't want to, because you mentioned that if you're going to restrict users from creating team, it means
Yeah.
that they will not be able to create any group within Microsoft 365 workload. So, is there a way we can, just restrict access to teams or access to creating teams alone without affecting other service?
I'm afraid no. I'm afraid no. The reason is because Microsoft Teams group is the Teams group is just a Microsoft 365 group, not just a team, right? It's also a Microsoft Teams group. Maybe Microsoft might in the future bring out a demarcation between the both of them, but as of today, the Microsoft Teams that you have is a Microsoft 365 group, which will replicate in every other group like SharePoint, like Planner, like Azure group. So it goes around every Microsoft 365 workload that you have. So as once you restrict users from creating a group, right, you are restricting them from creating a group in all workloads.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's okay then. So, any other question? Okay. So, I think in the absence of no other question, then we're just gonna round up the session. We're gonna round up the session then. So,
I think I see one hand up
okay.
from Clinton.
Oh, Clinton, sorry. All right, Clinton, can you
Okay.
go ahead with your
Good
question?
day, everyone. Yeah. I'm actually new to this, but the company I used to work with was Sidmark, and they had this team that handles all the system administration, Microsoft 365. So I'm just in the learning process of how to undergo or use this app and other everything about 365. So it's kind of new to me. So the questions I'll have to ask, I know it might draw everyone back. So I don't know if it's possible for me to get like maybe a few recordings of the beginning course so that I'll be able to catch up with you guys. Maybe probably in your next class.
Yeah, sure, Clinton. So, um, I want to believe that you're new. Yeah, we have a YouTube channel where where we upload all our, every meeting for the week. So you can visit our YouTube channel. I'm going to drop the link on the chat so that you can actually go back there and watch our past recordings on Microsoft 365 from the beginning. And I think about 3 weeks now we've been talking about Teams. So in the past, we've also talked about other services in Microsoft 365 as a whole. So you can actually visit our YouTube channel and then you would be able to watch previous episode and also catch up from there. And next week also will continue on our session. So if you have any questions, maybe from what you've watched and then you want to ask, you can feel free to bring it to the table and would always answer the question.
So
Yeah.
So
is the YouTube channel available on your page?
Okay,
yeah,
I've
we
dropped
have.
it in the chat. Yeah, Clinton,
Okay.
can you check the chat? I've dropped it there for you.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Emmanuel. So if you check the chat, you see it there. You can just click on that and it will take, so you can watch past videos, and then I'm sure you'll be able to catch up with us. Okay. So is that okay, Clinton?
Yes, it is. It is. Thank you very much. Thank you very
All
much. I
right.
appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, so any other question? We're rounding up now. Or okay, all right. So then we're going to be joining the curtain right now. Thank you very much for joining today's session. And next week we'll be continuing the part 4 of the Microsoft Teams study series. Microsoft Teams, the part 4 of Microsoft Teams, and then our speaker still remains Chidiebere. And